The rain hammered the diner's tin roof like 1,000 tiny fists, turning the parking lot into a slick mirror of neon lights and regret. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of burnt coffee and sizzling bacon, a haven for night owls and wanderers in this forgotten stretch of highway. At a corner booth, a young woman clutched her toddler close, her eyes darting toward the door every few seconds. The child, no more than 4, whimpered softly, his small hands twisting the edge of her worn jacket. She whispered reassurances, but fear etched lines on her face that no amount of makeup could hide. Outside, headlights pierced the downpour, 2 sedans pulling up too close, too deliberate. Men spilled out, their voices carrying like thunder, demanding she come out. "You can't run forever, Lisa," one snarled, pounding on the glass. The diner fell silent, patrons averting their eyes, the waitress frozen mid-pour. This wasn't just a storm. It was a reckoning, the kind that left scars deeper than the night. If this story's gripping you already, smash that like button and subscribe for more tales of unbreakable bonds and quiet heroism. We're just getting started. Across the lot, the low rumble of a motorcycle cut through the chaos like a blade. A single headlight sliced the rain, growing brighter until it bathed the sedans in harsh white. The rider pulled up slow, deliberate, his leather jacket glistening like black oilskin. He killed the engine, the sudden silence amplifying the men's shouts. Broad-shouldered, with a salt and pepper beard framing a face carved by years of hard miles, he swung off the bike, boots splashing in puddles. The men turned, sizing him up, one with a sneer, the other cracking his knuckles. "This ain't your business, old man," the leader spat, stepping forward. The biker didn't flinch. He glanced at the diner window, locking eyes with Lisa for a heartbeat, then back to the threats. "Looks like it just became," he said, voice gravelly, steady as an anchor in a gale. What happened next would ripple through lives like a promise etched in stone, binding strangers into something unbreakable. The biker, Ethan Hargrove, though few knew his full name, had ridden these roads for decades, chasing ghosts from a war that never quite let him go. He'd seen enough shadows in his rear view to know when one needed light. As the men advanced, he didn't draw a weapon or raise his voice. He simply stood his ground, the rain tracing paths down his weathered face. The leader lunged, fist swinging wild, but Ethan sidestepped with the grace of someone who danced with death before. A quick grab, a twist, not brutal but firm, and the man hit the gravel, wind knocked out. The second hesitated, then charged. Ethan met him with a shoulder block, sending him sprawling into a puddle. It wasn't a fight for glory. It was a stand for the forgotten, the ones the world chewed up and spat out. Inside, Lisa's breath caught. The toddler buried his face in her side, but she couldn't look away. The waitress finally moved, dialing for help, her hands shaking. Ethan straightened, wiping rain from his eyes, and nodded toward the diner. "Get her out the back," he called to no one in particular, but a burly trucker at the counter rose without a word, ushering Lisa and the boy toward the kitchen. The men scrambled up, cursing, but sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had called it in. They piled into their cars and peeled out, tires spinning mud and menace. Ethan watched them go, then turned to his bike, but not before the diner's door swung open. Lisa emerged, child in arms, her voice trembling. "Why? You don't even know us." He paused, helmet in hand, the rain easing to a drizzle that caught the first hints of dawn on the horizon. "Knew someone who did," he murmured, eyes distant. It was all he said, but in that moment, the weight of unspoken oaths hung between them. Ethan had been a Navy SEAL once, elite and unbreakable, until a mission in the sands overseas shattered his world. A buddy lost, a promise made in the heat of desperation. "If I don't make it, watch over mine." He'd buried that vow deep, riding solo for years, patching wounds with the Iron Promise crew, a ragtag family of vets and outcasts, bound by leather vests and loyalty fiercer than blood. But seeing Lisa, the fear in her eyes mirroring a face from the past, cracked something open. Her husband, his old SEAL brother, gone too soon, leaving whispers of trouble in his wake. Debts, rivals, the kind that followed like exhaust fumes. As the sun crested, painting the lot in gold, Ethan fired up his engine. Lisa reached out, tentative. "Wait, please, they're coming back." He revved once, then killed it again. The diner crowd gathered at the windows, murmurs rippling like waves. This wasn't just a rescue. It was the spark of a fire that would draw in the crew, old flames and new allies, to face down corruption rotting from the inside out. Ethan nodded, pulling out his phone. "Call the number I give you. Tell 'em Hawk sent you." Hawk, that was his road name, a nod to the sharp-eyed vigilance he'd carried from the battlefield. Within minutes, his phone buzzed, messages from the Brotherhood, riders mobilizing, engines humming across state lines, a forgotten promise dusted off and revved to life. The morning light filtered through the diner's fogged windows as Ethan slid into a booth opposite Lisa, the toddler dozing now in her lap. She poured him coffee, black as midnight, and for the first time, the diner felt less like a pit stop and more like a crossroads. "He talked about you," she said softly, tracing the rim of her mug. "My husband said you saved him more times than he could count." Ethan's jaw tightened, memories flooding back, the crack of gunfire, the acrid smoke, the oath sworn under stars that seemed indifferent. "And I failed him once," he admitted, voice low. "Won't again." Outside, the first bikes arrived, chrome gleaming like promises fulfilled. A convoy forming, not for war, but for justice, the moral kind, where truth cut deeper than any blade. As the crew assembled, Ethan felt the old fire stir. This wasn't about vengeance, it was redemption, piecing together a family fractured by loss. Lisa's story unfolded in hushed tones. Threats from shady developers eyeing her late husband's land, bribes turning to intimidation. The law turned a blind eye, pockets lined with green. But Ethan knew the code: honor over orders, loyalty over fear. By noon, 75 riders would roll out, a thunderous wave against the storm. For now, in the quiet aftermath, he saluted the memory of his brother, fist to chest, and prepared to ride into the dawn. The diner faded behind them, but the bond forged there. It was just beginning, a legacy of quiet courage that no rain could wash away. The sun climbed higher, burning off the last wisps of morning mist that clung to the diner's gravel lot like reluctant ghosts. Ethan Hargrove sat across from Lisa, his calloused hands wrapped around a mug that had seen better days, steam curling up like unanswered questions. The toddler, little Noah, she'd called him, stirred in her lap, his tiny chest rising and falling in the rhythm of uneasy sleep. Outside, the growl of engines multiplied, a symphony of Harleys and choppers pulling in from the back roads, their riders dismounting with the quiet efficiency of men who'd answered calls in the dead of night before. Leather creaked, boots thudded on wet asphalt, and the air filled with the sharp tang of exhaust, mingling with the faint earthy scent of rain-soaked earth. Lisa's eyes, red-rimmed but fierce, met Ethan's. "His name was Daniel," she said, her voice a fragile thread in the diner's hush. "We met after he came home. Said the desert had taken pieces of him he couldn't get back. But he promised me we'd build something real here, on that patch of land by the river. Now they're saying it's theirs, that he owed them." Her fingers tightened on Noah's blanket, knuckles whitening. Ethan nodded slowly, the weight of her words settling like dust on his shoulders. Daniel, his SEAL brother, the one with the quick laugh and quicker aim. The one who'd pulled him from the rubble of a collapsed outpost under a sky choked with sandstorms. That promise whispered in the foxhole as medevac choppers thrummed overhead. "If I go down, Hawk, you look after them. Swear it." Ethan had sworn, then buried the oath under miles of blacktop and bar fights, convincing himself the war was over. But promises like that? They rusted, but never broke. A shadow fell across the booth as the diner's door swung open, admitting a wall of muscle and ink. First in was Marcus, Ethan's right hand in the Iron Promise crew, a former Marine with a shaved head, scarred from shrapnel and eyes that missed nothing. He slid into the seat beside Ethan, his vest patched with the club's emblem, a steel fist clutching a broken chain, symbol of bonds forged in fire. "Got your message, Hawk," Marcus rumbled, voice like gravel under tires. 20 riders already en route from the north. What's the play? Behind him, 2 more filed in. Sarah, a no-nonsense mechanic who'd traded nursing scrubs for a wrench after losing her brother to the same sands, and Tyler, a young vet with a prosthetic leg that didn't slow his stride. They nodded to Lisa, respect in their gazes, no questions asked. This was the family chosen, pieced together from the wreckage of battles won and lost, where loyalty wasn't inherited, but earned in the quiet hours. Ethan leaned forward, the booth's vinyl creaking under his weight. "Developers," he said flatly, piecing together Lisa's fragmented story. "Shady outfit calling themselves Frontier Holdings. Daniel turned down their buyout. Said the land was clean, no fracking poison for the river that feeds half the county." They leaned, he pushed back. "Now he's gone. Accident, they say, and they're circling like vultures." Lisa's breath hitched, but she pressed on. "It wasn't an accident. He called me that night, voice shaking. Said they threatened Noah, said I'd lose everything if we didn't sign." The words hung heavy, the diner's clock ticking like a countdown. Ethan felt the old rage stir, not the hot flash of combat, but a cold resolve, the kind that built walls against corruption. These weren't just land grabbers. Whispers from old contacts hinted at ties to bent officials, badges bought with briefcases of cash. Justice, the real kind, didn't come from courtrooms lined with lies. Marcus cracked his knuckles, a sound like dry twigs snapping. "We ride for recon first. Scout their offices, see who's pulling strings. No guns, no glory, just eyes and ears." Sarah chimed in, her voice steady as she pulled a worn map from her saddlebag, spreading it on the table. Lines snaked across the paper. The river bend, the development site marked with a red X. Access roads, twisting like veins. "I've got a cousin in the county clerks, says records show bribes funneled through shell companies. But they're watching her now." Tyler, ever the hothead tempered by loss, added, "And the law? That sheriff's boy is in their pocket. Saw him at the roadhouse last week, laughing with their suits." The group leaned in, heads close. Plotting not with vengeance, but precision, a moral compass guiding the throttle. Outside, the lot transformed into a staging ground. Bikes lined up in precise rows, chrome catching the sunlight in blinding flashes, engines idling with a low, unified purr that vibrated through the diner's floorboards. More riders arrived, a convoy of 15 from the east, led by an older woman named Grace, her silver braid whipping in the breeze as she killed her engine. She'd been a combat medic, hands that stitched wounds, now gripping handlebars. "Heard about Daniel," she said, clasping Ethan's forearm. "We don't let our own fade into the dirt." By midday, the count swelled, 40, then 50, voices murmuring plans over the hum of anticipation. Lisa watched from the window. Noah awake now, and pointing at the machines with wide-eyed wonder. For the first time since the rain, a spark of hope flickered in her eyes, fragile as dawn light. Ethan stood, the decision settling like a key, turning in a lock. "We move at dusk, draw their eyes to the front while we slip in the back way." He turned to Lisa, his gaze softening. "You and the boy head to the safe house upriver. Sarah'll ride with you." She nodded, tears unshed, and in that exchange the promise reignited. A flame passed from one guardian to the next. As the crew dispersed to prep, Ethan stepped into the lot, the sun warm on his back. The air hummed with purpose, the scent of oil and resolve thick as fog. This ride wasn't for headlines or havoc, it was for the truth buried under layers of greed, for the honor that bound them tighter than any chain. Shadows lengthened as the day waned, and with them the tension coiled, like a spring ready to unleash not destruction, but redemption's quiet roar. But as the first scouts peeled out, a lone sedan crested the horizon, dust trailing like a warning. The driver, one of the men from the night before, spotted the assembly and braked hard, Yvonne already to his ear. Ethan watched, unblinking, knowing the storm was just gathering force. Calls would come, threats would fly, but the iron promise didn't bend. They rode through. And now I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The dust settled in lazy swirls as the sedan idled at the lot's edge, its driver frozen like a deer in headlights, phone pressed to his ear. Ethan's eyes narrowed against the glare, the sun now a fierce orb hanging low, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the gravel. The Iron Promise riders paused in their preparations, hands drifting instinctively toward saddlebags. But no one moved. Marcus shifted beside him, a low growl escaping his throat. "That's one of 'em from the diner. Thinks he's clever." Ethan raised a hand, steadying the group. This wasn't the time for rash moves. It was a chess game. And patience was their queen. Inside the car, the man's voice cracked through the open window, urgent and laced with panic. "Yeah, boss, it's them! Whole damn crew! Must be 50 bikes. That biker from last night, he's leading it." A pause, then a frantic nod. "Hargrove? Yeah, rings a bell. What do I do?" The response was inaudible, but the sedan's tires spun suddenly, kicking up a plume that choked the air with fine grit. It fishtailed onto the highway, vanishing into the heat haze. Ethan exhaled slowly, the metallic tang of tension lingering on his tongue. Word was out. Frontier Holdings would know by now. Their little empire of bribes and bulldozers under siege by ghosts from the past. Back in the diner, the air had thickened with the influx of riders seeking shelter from the midday sun. Booths overflowed with maps and murmurs, the scent of cooling coffee mixing with the faint, leathery aroma of vests worn thin by miles. Lisa sat with Noah in a corner, Sarah beside her, sketching escape routes on a napkin, while the boy colored with borrowed crayons, oblivious to the storm brewing. Ethan's gaze flicked to them, a protective instinct flaring like an old wound. Daniel's face superimposed in his mind, grinning under a desert moon, sharing a smoke after a patrol gone sideways. "We fight for what's ours, Hawk," he'd said then. "Not the orders, the soul of it." That soul now rested in a widow's hands and a child's laughter, fragile as cracked pavement. Grace approached Ethan, her boots scuffing the linoleum with quiet authority. At 62, she carried the weight of 2 tours as a medic, her hands scarred from sutures and shrapnel pulls. "Scouts are out," she reported, voice a calm anchor. "Tyler's leading the river run. Says the site's crawling with equipment already. Fences up, but no guards yet. They're moving fast." Ethan nodded, rubbing the stubble on his jaw, the rasp audible in the diner's hush. "And the clerk's cousin?" Grace's eyes darkened. She spooked. "Pulled the records last night. Shell companies layering like onion skins. Ties back to the sheriff's office. Donations that smell like payoffs. But someone's been in her files. She found traces of tampering." Corruption, Ethan thought, the kind that festered in small towns, turning protectors into predators. It mirrored the betrayals he'd seen overseas, commanders selling out squads for promotions, leaving men to rot in the dunes. Marcus leaned against the counter, arms crossed, his tattooed forearms flexing like coiled springs. "We hit their HQ at dusk, like planned. Draw 'em out with a show of force, ride circles till they bite. Then we slip the evidence team in." It was a plan born of necessity, not bloodlust. Gather proof, Expose the rot, let the light of truth do the rest. Ethan felt the pull of doubt, a whisper from his SEAL days. How many ops had gone south on a single leak? But this crew wasn't green. They were forged in the same fires, bound by oaths that outlasted uniforms. "No one rides alone," he said, the words a ritual. "We watch each other's backs, for Daniel, for all of us." As the afternoon dragged, the lot pulsed with activity. Engines revved in test runs, the deep throbs echoing off the diner's walls like a heartbeat accelerating. Riders shared stories in clusters, Tyler recounting a close call in the hills, his prosthetic glinting as he gestured, Sarah demonstrating a lockpick on a mock gate, her mechanic's precision turning suspicion into strategy. Noah toddled over to Ethan, clutching a crumpled drawing of a bike with stick-figure riders, his small voice piping up, "You go fast." Ethan knelt, the vinyl of his knee pads creaking, and ruffled the boy's hair. "Only when it matters, kid. And right now, it does." Lisa watched from afar, her expression a mix of gratitude and grief, the lines around her eyes softening for the first time. In that moment, Ethan saw the promise not as a burden, but a bridge, connecting the man he'd failed to the family he'd now shielded. Dusk crept in like a thief, painting the sky in bruised purples and oranges, the horizon bleeding into the river's bend. The convoy assembled in formation, 75 strong now, engines idling in a unified rumble that shook the ground. Ethan mounted his Harley, the familiar weight settling like an old friend, leather gripping the bars slick with anticipation. He glanced at Lisa, strapped into Sarah's sidecar with Noah, her nod a silent vow. "Ride safe," she called over the din. He revved once, the roar cutting the twilight, and led the way out, a thunderous wave rolling toward the development site, dust devils trailing in their wake. But as they crested the first rise, tail lights flared ahead. 3 black SUVs blocking the access road, flanked by county cruisers with lights pulsing silently. The sheriff himself stepped out, badge catching the fading light, his face a mask of false authority. "Hargrove," he barked through a megaphone, voice amplified and oily. "This is private property. Turn around or we're doing this the hard way." Riders exchanged glances, throttles twitching, but Ethan raised a fist, halting the line. This was the line in the sand, corruption staring them down, demanding surrender. He dismounted slow, boots crunching gravel, and walked forward, the crew fanning out behind like wings of iron. "You know why we're here," Ethan said, voice carrying clear and unyielding. The sheriff smirked, but his eyes darted, nervous, calculating. "Vigilantes playing hero? Step aside, or I'll have you all in cuffs." In the distance, the scouts' radios crackled. Tyler's voice, urgent. "Hawk, movement at the site. They're burning documents." The air thickened with unspoken threats, the river's murmur a distant underscore to the standoff. Ethan's hand rested on his vest, over the patch where Daniel's name was inked in memory. No backing down. This confrontation wasn't just for land, it was for the soul of justice, the kind that saluted the fallen and stood tall against the tide. Tension coiled tighter as the sheriff's men fanned out, hands on holsters. Grace whispered from her bike, "We push!" Ethan shook his head, eyes locked on the lawman. "We talk, truth first." But deep down, he knew words might not suffice. The storm of reckoning was here, engines humming like a promise on the verge of breaking free. The sheriff's megaphone crackled like dry leaves underfoot, his voice slicing through the twilight haze that draped the access road like a shroud. "Last chance, Hargrove. This ain't your rodeo." The words hung in the cooling air, mingling with the river's low gurgle and the impatient snorts of idling engines. Ethan's boots ground into the gravel as he stepped closer, the 75 riders, a solid wall of leather and chrome behind him, their silhouettes etched against the dying sun. Flashes of orange streaked the sky, painting the SUV's hoods in blood-like hues. while the county cruiser's silent lights pulsed blue and red, a hypnotic warning that did little to deter the resolve etched on every face. Ethan's gaze held steady on the sheriff, a man named Harlan, mid-50s with a paunch straining his uniform and eyes that flickered like faulty wiring. They'd crossed paths once before, years ago at a roadside bar, when Harlan was just a deputy turning blind eyes for extra cash. Now, power had bloated him, turning suspicion into swagger. "Rodeo," Ethan echoed, his tone even, gravelly, from years of shouting over rotor blades and thunder. "This is about a promise, Harlan. One your bosses are trying to bury under dirt and dollars." The sheriff's smirk faltered for a split second, a tell as clear as a crack in armor. Behind him, his deputies shifted, hands hovering near belts, the metallic jingle of gear a tense underscore. From the flanks, Marcus edged his bike forward, engine purring low like a predator's growl. Grace flanked the other side, her silver braid catching the last light, a quiet sentinel with hands that had saved more lives than this man had tarnished. Tyler's voice buzzed in Ethan's earpiece, faint but urgent. "Hawk, sights lighting up, trucks rolling in. Looks like they're prepping to haul evidence away. We got minutes." The words ignited a spark in Ethan's chest, not rage, but the steady burn of duty, the kind that had carried him through foxholes and sand-swept nights. Daniel's face flickered in his mind again, sweat-streaked, determined, whispering that oath as explosions rattled the horizon. "Soul of it, brother," he'd said. This was the soul, standing against the tide of greed that drowned the innocent. Harlan laughed, a bark devoid of humor, echoing off the riverbank where willows whispered secrets to the current. Promises, save the poetry for the barflies, that land's zoned for progress, jobs, growth. Your buddy Daniel got in the way, signed his own ticket out. The lie landed like a slap, and Lisa, watching from Sarah's sidecar at the convoy's rear, gasped audibly, her arms tightening around Noah. The boy, sensing the shift, whimpered, his small fingers clutching her sleeve. Ethan's jaw clenched, the salt of old wounds tasting on his tongue. "Accident, you called it. But witnesses say otherwise. Brakes tampered, road-blocked, and those donations to your campaign, they trace back to Frontier's vaults." The sheriff's face hardened, color rising like steam from a kettle. He gestured sharply, and two deputies advanced, batons drawn, their boots crunching in sync. "You're trespassing, son. Step back or we'll make you." The air thickened, charged with the scent of hot metal from exhausts and the faint, loamy breath of the river. Riders tensed, throttles revved in warning, a chorus of deep rumbles that vibrated through the ground like an earthquake's prelude. Sarah murmured to Lisa, "Stay low," her mechanic's hands steady on the handlebars, ready to bolt if words turned to blows. But Ethan didn't retreat. He closed the gap, voice dropping to a pitch that carried only to Harlan. "I know about the safe deposit box in the county bank. Daniel left copies, deeds, ledgers, your signature on the dotted line. Burn what you want at the site. Truth doesn't ash easy." A flicker of real fear crossed Harlan's eyes, gone as quick as a shadow. He raised the megaphone again, but before the words formed, a distant roar swelled. More engines, not from the convoy but from the opposite direction. Headlights pierced the gloom, a line of Frontier's private security, pickups loaded with gear, barreling down the access road. Dust billowed in their wake, choking the air with fine particles that stung like accusations. The standoff fractured into motion, deputies barking orders, SUVs repositioning with squealing tires. Ethan signaled his crew, a subtle wave, and half peeled off toward the river path, scouts diverting to intercept the evidence burn. Tyler's voice crackled again. "On it, Hawk. We're cutting through the willows. 2 minutes to the fence." Chaos bloomed like a slow-motion bloom, the river reflecting the frenzy in rippling distortions. One deputy lunged at Ethan, baton swinging in a wide arc, But Marcus was there in a blur, grabbing the man's arm with a twist that dropped him to his knees without a punch thrown. "Easy," Marcus growled, holding firm but not harming. The code clear. Defend, don't destroy. Grace revved her bike, circling wide to shield Lisa and Noah, her voice cutting through the din. "Eyes on the kid, keep 'em clear." Ethan faced Harlan square, the sheriff's hand inching toward his radio. "Call 'em off," Ethan said, unyielding, "or this goes public. Every rider here has a phone streaming live. Your career, their empire. Poof." Harlan hesitated, sweat beading on his brow despite the cooling dusk. The frontier truck skidded to a halt 50 yards out. Men piling out with flashlights, slicing the dark like knives. Shouts echoed, overlapping with the convoy's unified roar. A wall of sound that drowned doubt. In that suspended breath, Ethan saw the crack widen. Harlan's radio buzzed, a frantic voice from HQ demanding abort. The sheriff lowered the megaphone, face ashen, the mask slipping. "You don't know what you're stirring," he muttered. But the fight had ebbed from his stance. Deputies backed off, batons sheathed, the cruiser's lights dimming as if in surrender. As the frontier crew faltered, spotting the sheer numbers, the unyielding line, they reversed, tails between legs, leaving trails of dust and defeat. Ethan's heart pounded, not from adrenaline but vindication, the first fracture in the wall of corruption. He turned to his riders, fist raised in salute, the gesture a silent oath renewed. "For Daniel," he called, and the response thundered back, engines igniting in unison, a symphony of loyalty that shook the stars awakening overhead. Lisa met his eyes from afar, her nod a bridge across the grief, Noah waving a tiny fist in echo. The convoy reformed, splitting tasks, main force holding the road, scouts slipping into the night toward the site. Ethan mounted up, the leather of his seat warm from the day's heat, the throttle responding like an extension of his will. Dusk deepened to velvet black, the river a silver thread guiding them forward. But as they rolled out, a single headlight detached from the horizon, another bike, lone and purposeful, approaching the fray. Its rider pulled alongside Ethan at the lead, helmet off, revealing a face weathered by the same sands. A Navy SEAL from Daniel's unit, eyes widening in recognition. "Hargrove, heard the call. Saluted your brother this morning. Now I'm riding with you." The words landed like absolution, binding past to present in the hum of the road. Redemption wasn't a solo ride. It was this, a family chosen. Promises fulfilled under the indifferent stars. If this story's gripping you already, smash that like button and subscribe for more tales of unbreakable bonds and quiet heroism. We're just getting started. The lone headlight cut through the encroaching night like a beacon from forgotten battles, its beam dancing over the uneven asphalt as the rider pulled even with Ethan's lead position. The convoy slowed to a rumble, engines idling in a low chorus that vibrated through the handlebars and into bones. Ethan glanced sideways, his visor up, rain from earlier still beading on his leather like unshed tears. The new arrival killed his engine with a decisive flick, the sudden quiet amplifying the river's murmur and the distant calls of night birds. He was built like the desert had forged him, tall, lean, with a jaw shadowed by stubble and eyes that held the hollow stare of men who'd stared down death too many times. "Name's Jacob," the rider said, voice roughened by sand and silence, extending a gloved hand across the gap between bikes. No hesitation, just the firm grip of recognition. "Served with Daniel in the 3rd Group. Pulled his ass out of a Wadi ambush back in 09. He mentioned you, Hawk, the one who never left a man behind." Ethan's grip tightened for a beat, memories flooding back unbidden. The acrid bite of cordite, the whine of incoming fire, Daniel's blood soaking the sand as they dragged him to evac. Jacob's arrival wasn't coincidence. It was the pull of oaths, rippling outward like shockwaves from a blast. "Heard about the diner scrap through the vet network. Jacob continued, scanning the line of riders with a nod of approval. Said you'd need backup if his ghosts ever caught up. Saluted his marker this morning. Figured it was time to make good. Behind them, the crew absorbed the newcomer without question, Marcus giving a thumbs up from his flank. Grace's eyes appraising but warm. This was how the Iron Promise worked, threads of loyalty weaving in from the edges, strengthening the whole. Ethan nodded, the weight of Jacob's words settling like ballast. We ride for his land, his family. Frontiers burning evidence as we speak. Shell companies, bribes, the works tying back to the sheriff. Jacob's face hardened, the lines around his mouth deepening. Saw their type overseas. Contractors with fat wallets and empty souls, buying loyalty till it bleeds. Daniel wouldn't fold. Neither will we. He remounted, engines snarling to life, slotting into formation as if he'd always been there. The convoy surged forward again, tires humming over the cracked road, the river's silver gleam their guide through the willow-choked bends. Up ahead, the development site loomed like a scar on the landscape. Floodlights harsh against the dark, casting jagged shadows over half-erected fences and hulking machinery. The air grew thick with the diesel reek of generators and the sharp tang of burning paper, acrid smoke curling skyward in lazy spirals. Tyler's scouts had beaten them there, their bikes hidden in the underbrush, radios crackling updates. Hawk, we've got eyes on the burn pit, 2 suits overseeing, guards patrolling the perimeter. Ledgers going up in flames, but we snagged a duffel from the trailer. Hard drives, docks, looks legit. Ethan's pulse quickened, the thrill of the ops stirring old instincts, but tempered now by the moral anchor of the promise. This wasn't extraction for glory, it was unearthing truth, the kind that exposed rot without adding to it. As the main force crested the rise, they fanned out in a deliberate arc, headlights off to blend with the night, the rumble of engines muffled to a growl. Lisa and Noah, tucked safe in the rear with Sarah's watchful eye, watched from a concealed overlook, the boy's small hand pointing at the glowing chaos. Bad guys? Noah whispered, and Lisa hushed him gently, her heart a drumbeat of hope and fear. Ethan signaled the split. Jacob and a handful of riders veering left toward the river flank, Marcus leading the diversion straight on. Make noise, Ethan instructed over the comms, voice steady as rebar. Draw 'em out. Give Tyler time to exfil. The diversion hit like thunder, engines revving high, headlights blazing to life in a sudden assault that lit the sight like a battlefield dawn. Guards spun, shouts piercing the night, their flashlights sweeping wildly as Frontier's security scrambled from trailers. Pickups roared to meet them, gravel spitting under tires. But the Iron Promise held formation, circling wide without engaging, a wall of unyielding presence. One guard fired a warning shot skyward, the crack echoing sharp, but Ethan didn't flinch. He knew the line, defend the light, not ignite the dark. Jacob's team slipped through the willows undetected, the river's edge masking their approach, water lapping at boots like a conspirator's whisper. Inside the fray, tension crackled like live wire. A Frontier truck barreled toward Marcus's line, but Grace cut it off with a precise weave, her bike's roar, a challenge unmet. "Back off!" A security lead bellowed from his door, rifle raised but unsteady. Marcus raised his hands, palms out, voice booming over the din. "We're not here for blood, just answers. Hand over the widow's deed, or this goes viral by morning." Phones were already out, streams live to vet forums and news tips, the digital net closing around the corruption. Back at the burn pit, Tyler's crew emerged from the shadows, duffel slung over shoulders, sprinting for the river path where Jacob waited with bikes revved and ready. Ethan watched from the ridge, the scene unfolding in flashes. A guard tackling one scout, only to be pulled off by Sarah's quick intervention. A shove, not a strike, disarming without harm. The moral edge held firm, justice poetic in its restraint. But then headlights pierced from the east, Sheriff Harlan's cruisers, sirens silent but lights strobing, reinforcements for the crumbling facade. Harlan stepped out again, megaphone in hand. Face twisted in the floodlight's glare. "Enough! Stand down, or I'll bury you all in charges." His voice wavered, the earlier bravado eroded by the evidence slipping away. Jacob's voice cut through the comms, urgent but controlled. "Got the package. Hard drives intact. Rendezvous at the old mill in 5. Ethan felt the shift, the tide turning not with fists but facts. He revved once, signaling retreat, the convoy peeling away in controlled waves, dust trails marking their path like signatures on a vow. Harlan's shouts faded behind, impotent against the roar of unity. As they regrouped at the mill's shadowed eaves, the duffel opened under lantern light, pages crisp with incriminating ink, digital ghosts of bribes and forged signatures. Lisa arrived last, Noah asleep against her, and her eyes met Ethan's, gratitude shining brighter than any floodlight. But Jacob pulled him aside, voice low amid the crew's murmurs. "Daniel left something else. A letter, tucked in my kit from years back. For you." He handed over a faded envelope, sealed with tape yellowed by time. Ethan's fingers trembled slightly as he broke it open, Daniel's scrawl jumping out. "If it comes to this, Hawk, remember, we're the shield, not the sword. Protect them with the honor we swore." The words sealed it, redemption's final piece clicking into place. The night deepened, plans shifting to exposure, press, lawyers, the slow grind of truth. Yet in the quiet, with engines cooling and stars wheeling overhead, Ethan knew the real victory, the promise unbroken, a family forged stronger in the fire's wake. Harlan's cruisers prowled the perimeter roads, but the mill stood dark, the crew dispersed into the woods like smoke. Dawn was hours off, but the light of justice? It burned eternal. The mill's weathered timbers creaked under the weight of secrets long buried, their splintered edges catching the lantern's flicker like veins of gold in old ore. Moonlight filtered through gaps in the roof, casting elongated shadows across the dirt floor where the Iron Promise crew gathered in a loose circle, faces etched with the quiet triumph of survivors. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp wood and cooling engines, mingled with the faint chemical bite of the duffel's contents, papers singed at the edges, hard drives humming faintly as Sarah hooked one to a battered laptop. Ethan stood at the center, the envelope from Jacob still clutched in his fist, Daniel's words burning into his palm like a brand renewed. Jacob leaned against a rusted beam, his bike's headlight casting a halo around him, eyes reflecting the screen's glow. "He wrote that after the Wadi pull," he said softly, breaking the hush. "Knew the risks we ran, even back then. Daniel always saw the long road, Hawk, not just the blast radius." Ethan nodded, throat tight, the letter folding into his vest pocket like a talisman. Around them, the crew worked in efficient silence. Marcus sorting ledgers by date, his thick fingers tracing lines of falsified transfers, Grace reviewing digital files, her medic's precision spotting patterns of payoffs that snaked from Frontier's boardroom to Harlan's re-election fund. Tyler paced the perimeter, prosthetic leg whispering against the earth, his radio scanning for tails. "Clear for now," he reported, voice low. "But that sheriff's scrambling. Heard chatter on the scanner. He's calling in favors from the state boys." Lisa sat on a crate near the back. Noah curled in her lap, his breaths even in sleep, oblivious to the web unraveling around them. Her eyes, shadowed but steady, met Ethan's across the lantern light. "You kept your word," she whispered, the words a bridge over the chasm of loss. Ethan knelt beside her, the gravel biting through his jeans, and placed a hand on Noah's shoulder, small, warm, a pulse of future unbroken. "We all did," he replied, the plural a vow to the circle. This was the family chosen, vets scarred by the same sons, mechanics and medics bound not by blood, but by the iron of shared scars. No one here rode for glory. They moved for the quiet honor that mended what wars and greed tore asunder. Sarah's laptop chimed, a soft ping slicing the tension. "Jackpot," she murmured, turning the screen. Grainy footage from a sight camera looped, frontier execs in a trailer, voices muffled but clear enough, discussing the accident on Daniel's truck, brakes cut under cover of night, Harlan's cruiser idling nearby as lookout. "This ties it all," Grace added, cross-referencing with the ledgers. Bribes to zoning boards, threats logged in emails, enough to bury them without a shovel. The crew leaned in, murmurs rising like steam from a fresh pot of coffee Marcus had brewed on a portable stove, its bitter aroma grounding the moment. Ethan felt the old seal fire steady into something purer, redemption not in vengeance but in revelation, the truth a blade that cut corruption without spilling more blood. Outside, the night deepened, stars pricking the velvet sky like distant promises kept. But the peace shattered with the crunch of tires on the mill road. Headlights sweeping wild, 2 cruisers and an unmarked van barreling in. Harlan's voice boomed from the lead car, amplified and edged with desperation. "Hargrove, we know you've got it. Hand it over, and maybe we talk leniency." The crew tensed, hands drifting to sides. But Ethan rose slow, signaling calm. Engines fired up in a low growl, bikes forming a protective semicircle around the women and child. Jacob mounted beside him, helmet clipped but visor open, a silent sentinel from the past. Harlan dismounted, flanked by deputies whose grips on their holsters looked more performative than prepared. His uniform hung loose now, authority fraying at the seams under the lantern's unforgiving light. "This ends here," he snarled, eyes darting to the duffel. "That evidence is tainted, vigilante theft." Ethan stepped forward, the circle parting like water, his voice steady as the river's flow. "Tainted, like the deeds you forged, or the donations that bought your silence on Daniel's brakes." He held up his phone, screen glowing with a live stream already pushing to independent journalists, vet networks, online watchdogs hungry for small-town rot. The feed captured Harlan's flinch, the deputy's hesitation, the van's driver fumbling for his radio. The sheriff's face twisted, a mix of rage and ruin. "You think this sticks? We're the law here." But his words rang hollow, the weight of exposure cracking his facade. Jacob spoke up then, voice carrying the timbre of command. "Law? We saluted better men than you in worse holes than this town. Daniel died for honor. You twisted it for pocket change." The words landed like a salute to the fallen, rippling through the crew. Marcus revved his engine once, a punctuation of unity, while Grace's gaze bored into Harlan. Unblinking, no shots fired, no charges leveled, just the unrelenting glare of truth, forcing the man to step back, gesturing his men to stand down. As dawn's first blush crept over the mill's ridge, painting the willows in soft pinks and golds, Harlan retreated, cruisers peeling out with tires spitting gravel like defeated curses. The stream went viral in minutes, tips flooding in from viewers. Lawyers offering pro bono, the state attorney's office already pinging alerts. Frontier's empire crumbled under the digital dawn, arrests whispered on morning radios, the land deeded back to Lisa by noon, clean and whole. Ethan watched the sun rise from his bike, the crew dispersing with handshakes and nods, Jacob clasping his shoulder one last time. "Ride's not over," the SEAL said, "but the promise, it's kept." Lisa approached, Noah rubbing sleep from his eyes, pointing at the horizon. "Home?" the boy asked, and she smiled. True, unbroken. Ethan saluted her then, fist to chest, the gesture echoing Daniel's oath under indifferent stars. The engine thrummed to life beneath him, the road stretching endless, but lighter now. Redemption wasn't a destination. It was this ride. The family chosen, the honor saluted, promises etched in the dust of miles yet to come. As the convoy faded into the light, the mill stood silent witness, a chapter closed in quiet thunder. Thank you for riding this journey with us. If this tale of unbreakable promises and quiet courage moved you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support keeps these stories of redemption rolling until the next dawn.